The dark reality of women in prison. What cameras don't show. Subscribe for more real crime stories. Like, share, and join the discussion below. The alarm hit the prison like a lightning strike. A shrill, metallic scream echoed through every hallway of the Central California Women's Facility, the largest women's prison in the United States. Guards sprinted past the medical unit, radios exploding with static and overlapping voices. But inside Dorm 512, the real chaos had already begun. A group of inmates stood frozen around a woman lying on the concrete floor. Her name was Shadae Schmidt, a 33-year-old incarcerated mother whose tragic story would soon expose a truth the public rarely sees: how quickly a mental health crisis inside a women's prison can turn deadly. Shadae wasn't moving. Her chest was barely rising. Her face was turning pale. Just minutes earlier, she'd been screaming, begging for help, after being pepper sprayed during a confrontation with staff. Cameras captured the spray. Cameras captured the officers dragging her. But what happened next, the part after she stopped yelling, the cameras didn't show. Nurses arrived late. Everyone who witnessed it said the same thing. She kept saying she couldn't breathe. The moment the medical staff finally rolled her onto a stretcher, her body went still, and the dorm erupted in panic. Some inmates cried. Others shouted at the guards. Officers pushed everyone back against the walls. The scene froze in time, an entire prison holding its breath. And then came the cliffhanger nobody was prepared for. A correctional lieutenant stepped into the room, looked down at Shadae's silent body, and said quietly to the staff, "Turn the camera off.
Now."
The screen cut to black.
Cut.
Months earlier, long before that day, the Central California Women's Facility ran like a worn-down machine, predictable, strained, and constantly at its breaking point. More than 2,700 women lived inside a space never designed to hold that many. Days were organized around counts, movement, and the thunderous slamming of steel doors. The prison yard was dusty and loud. The cafeteria served food many inmates joked could break your spirit, and each woman carried her own story of trauma, loss, or addiction. Shadae was one of them. She entered the prison with a history of mental health struggles, something extremely common among incarcerated women in the U.S. Studies show that more than 70% of women in prison have experienced severe trauma, and many arrive with untreated mental health conditions. Inside these walls, those conditions often get worse. Before the incident, inmates said they saw warning signs. Shadae talked less. She slept poorly. She paced the day room like she was trying to escape her own mind. But in an overcrowded prison, small changes don't always get noticed. On the morning of the incident, everything escalated fast. Officers said she refused orders. Inmates said she was in a panic, confused, and begging for help. The altercation grew. Pepper spray flew. Staff pulled her to the ground. The situation spiraled beyond control. By midday, the prison was already preparing for another lockdown. But no one imagined how far the fallout from this one moment would reach, or what the investigation would uncover about the dark reality of women's prisons in America. And just when the inmates thought the worst was over, a new, even more shocking discovery was coming. The day after Shadae's collapse, the prison felt different. The yard was unusually quiet. Inmates walked in tight circles, whispering to each other. Some cried openly. Others stared at the medical building like it was a crime scene. By sunrise, rumors were spreading faster than the guards could shut them down. Had Shadae died? Was someone responsible? Why did the lieutenant order the camera turned off? Nobody had answers, only fear. Inside the administration wing, investigators from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation were already gathering statements. The hallways smelled like old paper and disinfectant, and the mood was tense. Officers in uniform waited outside interview rooms, shifting uncomfortably. Nobody wanted to be the one blamed. Behind one of those doors sat a correctional officer named Officer Alyssa R., who had witnessed everything. Her hands trembled as she told investigators. She said she couldn't breathe. She said it over and over. The investigator asked, "Did medical respond appropriately?" A long silence followed. I don't think so," Alyssa whispered. That was the moment the investigation cracked open. To understand how things got so bad, the investigators had to go back months into a system already stretched beyond its limits. At the Central California Women's Facility, the mental health unit was overwhelmed. Only a few counselors handled hundreds of inmates, many with trauma, addiction, or severe depression. Women waited weeks, sometimes months, for evaluations. Medications were delayed. Therapy groups were canceled whenever staffing was short. Inside the prison, inmates had a simple phrase for it. You go in with problems, you come out worse. One camera crew from a previous documentary had captured this truth long before Shadae's case. During a filmed therapy session, nearly every woman in the circle admitted to childhood abuse. Some cried. Some stayed silent. Their stories were heartbreaking, but what happened off camera was even more devastating. When therapy ended, they went back to the same overcrowded dorms, the same chaos, the same pressure cooker. For Shadae, the warning signs were obvious. Inmates said she stopped showing up to meals. She talked to herself at night. She told staff she needed help. Some officers tried to get her seen. Others brushed her off. In a prison where calls for help were constant, one more distressed inmate didn't always get attention. But on the morning of the incident, the day the cameras later stopped recording, the pressure finally exploded. A confrontation began when Shadae refused to enter her cell for count. Officers said she was non-compliant. Inmates said she was terrified, shaking, and asking for mental health. What happened next was captured on surveillance. Shadae backed away. A voice yelled, "Stop resisting." Pepper spray was deployed. She collapsed moments later. But the most disturbing part wasn't the pepper spray. It was what followed. Multiple witnesses reported that after she was cuffed and taken to the medical unit, she begged for help while struggling to breathe. Some inmates heard her wheezing from down the hall. And then nothing. No cameras. No audio. No clear timeline. Just a stretch of darkness filled with unanswered questions. By the time investigators pieced together the missing minutes, one truth became undeniable. Something critical happened behind those closed doors, something no one wanted to say out loud. And when the official incident report was released to the public, inmates immediately noticed something shocking. Entire paragraphs were missing. The prison broke its silence 3 days later. A memo slipped under every dorm door at dawn. It was only 1 page, but it carried news that confirmed every inmate's worst fear. Inmate Shadae Schmidt was pronounced deceased. The yard erupted with emotion, anger, grief, disbelief. Some women sobbed uncontrollably. Others clenched their fists. A few stared at the sky, whispering prayers. Even inmates who didn't know Shadae felt the weight of the message. Because her death wasn't just a death. It was a warning. The administration announced an immediate, prison-wide lockdown. Officers swept each housing unit, ordering women to stand against the walls as they searched cells for contraband, notes, anything that looked like fuel for a rebellion. Tensions were so high that one wrong movement could have sparked a riot. But the real battle wasn't in the dorms. It was happening in the investigation rooms. Inside a small office near the warden's wing, the lead investigator reviewed the edited incident report. The missing paragraphs were obvious. Sections that should have detailed the final minutes of Shadae's life were blacked out, redacted with thick ink. Why were these removed? He asked sharply. A legal representative for the prison side. Security reasons, she said. But everyone in the room knew that wasn't true. The investigator pulled out witness statements. 2 nurses said Shadae told them she couldn't breathe. 1 officer said she saw her collapse in medical with no one monitoring her. Several inmates said she lay on the floor for too long before help arrived. When placed side by side, the picture was unmistakable. Shadae didn't die from the pepper spray. She died from neglect. Not intentional harm, neglect. A failure to give aid in time. A failure to listen to a woman in crisis. A failure of a system that was supposed to protect her, even if she was incarcerated. The truth was difficult, painful, and undeniable. And then came the moment the prison hoped would never leak. One officer quietly admitted, off the record, that the order to turn off the camera was given because staff feared they would be blamed for what happened next. That revelation hit the investigation like a bomb. Outside on the yard, the prison chaplain gathered the women for a memorial service. Dozens formed a circle. Some held hands. Some placed small, folded notes on the ground. Messages to Shadae. Apologies, memories, promises. One inmate said softly, "What they don't show on TV is how many of us are broken before we even get here, and how prison breaks us even more." Her voice shook. But the world needs to know what happened. Somebody has to tell it. And that's when the story took a final, unbelievable turn. The investigator who handled Shadae's case filed a report so detailed, so brutally honest, that outside agencies got involved. Advocacy groups, legal reform organizations, journalists. Shadae's story spread far beyond the prison walls. Her name became a symbol of a hidden truth. Women's prisons in America hold stories that cameras never fully capture, stories of trauma, silence, and suffering behind locked doors. Her case helped spark new conversations about mental health care, staff training, and inmate rights. It didn't bring her back, but it forced a spotlight onto a system long kept in the shadows. And for the women still inside, that light meant one thing. For once, their pain was finally seen.